Coffee Break Read Up a Tree from When Julia Met Edbert in Dying to Be Friends by E.M. Swifthook and Jane Jago. Julia went into the hut and unloaded her food bag before setting up the hut's unreliably shielded comms link, thus making sure the place looked inhabited to a casual eye. She carried the rest of her belongings to a broad-trunked oak tree where she dropped the bag on the ground. Several trips and a good deal of climbing later, she was satisfied with her arboreal nest. She sat in an accommodating fork right at the centre of the crown of the tree. She was barefoot, with 2 gel mattresses under her and a carefully woven twiggy roof over her head. She opened a self-heating food pouch with a momentary longing for the thick, tasty stew she had abandoned below. But then again, stew laced with sleeping drugs. Thanking her lucky stars that it was Augustus, not December, she leaned against the rough tree trunk and closed her eyes. She must have drifted off to sleep because she was startled into wakefulness by the sound of coarse masculine voices speaking in a language that was definitely not Latin. "Well, here's the hut. Where's the woman?" "She can't be far. Her stuff's here." "It is, indeed. So we wait, Kulan. You and the boy tether the Northman and the hounds." At the sound of the coarse male voice speaking the Mongol tongue, Julia felt herself regressing to a 12-year-old girl. A girl taken prisoner by Mongols and beaten half to death for disobedience before they tied her to a wooden bar and took turns raping her. She had been sure they were going to kill her, and they may well have done so had not a half a century of legionaries arrived in the nick of time. She didn't like to admit it, even to herself, but she still had nightmares, particularly about one Chingis, who had been amusing himself with a ligature about her throat in the moments before he met his demise. She dragged her mind back to the here and now, peering cautiously around a branch. Right below her, a small man was tying a blonde giant to the very tree on which she sat. The blonde had his hands tied behind his back and a rope around his neck by which he was being secured to the huge trunk. Additionally, another man was tying 2 thin grey dogs to another tree, cruelly tightly. When they had done that, they picketed 6 sturdy, short-legged ponies, carefully choosing the less rich grass at the forest edge. Julia held her breath, not moving a muscle, until a loud voice called from inside the hut. "There's a big pot of bantan here, and the woman won't have any use for it. I've heated it. We may as well eat." 2 braided Mongols cantered back towards the hut, and Julia let out a careful breath. It seemed like she might be about to have a stroke of luck. She dropped an acorn on the head of the man tied beneath her. He looked up incuriously, but his eyes widened when he realized there was a woman in the tree. Julia put a finger to her lips and smiled down. The big man nodded, then allowed his head to drop back onto his chest.